Hello, it is November 17th, 2023. I'm Susan Bradford, and this is the Susan Bradford Show. So today I'm going to respond to allegations from Maria Zack that the 2020 presidential election was stolen from Donald Trump. Now, I don't believe that it was. I was among the first reporters to cover Maria's allegations back in 2020. And I have to say that Maria never provided me any evidence, but that the election had in fact been stolen. But based on her allegations, it would appear that if her allegations were true, that the election was not stolen from Donald Trump, but rather he was colluding with Barack Obama to achieve the results that ultimately occurred, meaning that they both wanted Joe Biden to win that election. So I'm going to roll out my arguments in this presentation. Okay, so that the political elite would want to secure political outcomes is not unexpected, because political figures, politicians, control the public purse. And if you are able to secure your favored candidates into positions of authority, into positions of political power, you can influence them to redirect public funds and opportunities and contracts to you. So the political classes and the corporate classes have a vested interest in ensuring that their favored candidates win elections. So as the technocracy began to take shape in the United States with the launch of the Clinton administration, technocrats have increasingly been looking for ways in which they can influence outcomes on behalf of powerful special interests. So we saw the beginnings of this back in 2008. Okay, that was the point at which Eric Schmidt, who was the CEO of Google, and Mark Zuckerberg, who founded Facebook, had exploited data to influence the presidential election in favor of Barack Obama. Facebook wrote the template for winning elections, which was written in Russian and used by the Obama presidential campaign in 2008. Now, the Russian connection is very interesting because economist Larry Summers launched Facebook at Harvard. And Larry Summers was responsible for shoring up wealth and power for the Russian oligarchs while he was working at the World Bank. He did this by way of shock therapy. Trump's people, including Wilbur Ross, who was Trump's bankruptcy advisor, helped redirect public funds to Russia during the Clinton administration. This was done under the pretext of promoting free enterprise in Russia, and that was done by redirecting American or our assets over to Russia to capitalize the businesses of politically connected individuals. So the United States, in part, helped create and fund the Russian oligarch class. And there were a number of Trump allies, whom I identify in my book, Taking Back America, who were involved in shoring up elections and power for the reform candidates who took power, assumed power during the Clinton administration. And once Yeltsin has served his term, Larry Summers then ensured that Vladimir Putin was named his successor. So in part, Vladimir Putin in part owes his power to Larry Summers. And it's not surprising to see that the Russians have been meddling, allegedly, in American elections and are also angel investors in tech companies. So this template for winning elections that was created by Facebook, which in turn was created by Larry Summers, was an extension of the US Digital Service, otherwise known as the Eric Schmidt Project. Now, the Eric Schmidt Project targeted federal agencies, including the Federal Election Commission, to secure elections for preferred candidates. The idea, according to FEC documents, was to move all FEC data processing to the cloud and thus under the control of the IBM Eclipse Foundation, established by IBM's chief inside counsel, David Kapos, who was Obama's director of the patent office. So a gentleman by the name of Jim Messina was working very closely with Eric Schmidt and Mark Zuckerberg to help Obama best exploit data in order to perform favorably in elections. So who was Jim Messina? Jim Messina was a congressional aide to Senator Max Baucus, who was lobbied very heavily by Republican special interests, particularly those aligned with the pharmaceutical companies and with the religious right. And so that he was tapped to serve as a leading campaign official for Obama, and then subsequently to chief of staff within the Obama administration, raised a lot of cackles amongst the Democrats because he was not drawn from the Obama movement, but was very much aligned with Republican corporate interests. So Messina went on to work very closely with Schmidt to mastermind Obama's 2012 presidential victory. He, meaning Schmidt, advised Messina in a way that abandoned every step of a traditional presidential campaign and merged technology and politics in a way that was both unprecedented and unpredictable. That same year, in 2012, the elites attempted to launch an electronic direct democracy. And as you could expect, an electronic direct democracy could potentially be hacked. So if it's hackable, you could then very carefully and strategically through electronic and technical means rig elections for your preferred candidate. So Ross Perot, who was an ally of Donald Trump, established Americans Elect to promote an electronic direct democracy in 2012 to hold an online primary for prospective presidential candidates. So already in 2012, they're looking at using electronics and technology to manage elections. So among the board members of this Perot company were E.L. Rothschild's CEO, Lynn Forrester de Rothschild, who was the wife of Evelyn de Rothschild, the financial advisor to the Queen of England. Another board member was Ambassador John Negroponte, whose brother presides over the MIT Media Labs. And the MIT Media Labs work very closely with Eric Schmidt and has been funded in part with money from Jeffrey Epstein and Sam Bankman-Fried. In 2013, Jim Messina left Obama to enter the lucrative world of political consulting. Among his clients were UK Prime Minister David Cameron, and so Messina worked on the Brexit campaign. Another client of his was Italian Prime Minister Matteo Renzi. Now, according to Maria Zack, Matteo Renzi and Obama had collaborated to secure the 2020 election for Joe Biden. And they did so, she said, through electronic means. Now, would Obama rig an election? Well, there appears to have been a pattern that was kind of taking shape. In 2014, Judicial Watch sued the Obama administration over possible violations of the Hatch Act involving Messina and Rahm Emanuel on grounds that they were using their political influence as administrators within the Obama administration to influence federal elections. So we have a pattern, that is emerging here. In 2016, when Hillary Clinton was expected to win the election, something happened along the way, and that something was that the Russian oligarchs were being targeted by the Magnitsky Act, which ensured that anybody connected to Vladimir Putin, that targeted like the Russian oligarchs who had engaged in human rights violations, could have their assets seized. So essentially, the assets of the Russian oligarchs were in jeopardy in 2016, and they were looking for ways in which they could lobby an administration to circumvent the Magnitsky Act in order to preserve their wealth. So Donald Trump, with his contacts to Jack Abramoff and Wilbur Ross and others with deep ties to the Kremlin, turned out to be their preferred candidate. But the Russians were at that time interested in circumventing the Magnitsky Act, and they were looking for a candidate who would do that, who would do so, would carry water for them. Jack Abramoff, who was a close associate of Donald Trump's, who ended up lobbying the Trump campaign and working with Jared Kushner on a Bitcoin project, had deep ties to the Russian oligarchs and to Jacob Rothschild, who was working very closely with Vladimir Putin. So Facebook and Cambridge Analytica were enlisted to help secure the election for Donald Trump in 2016. Okay, that is not in dispute. Eric Schmidt, in turn, was brought in to advise the White House afterward. His daughter interned at Cambridge Analytica, so you can see they're all kind of part of the same circle. Schmidt advised Jared Kushner, who in turn was working with Jack Abramoff, who in turn was a leading contact with the Russian oligarchs. So in 2016, Messina worked as co-chair of the super PAC, Priorities USA. And this PAC raised money for Hillary Clinton in her campaign against Donald Trump. However, concerns over Russian assets and a desire by the oligarchs to circumvent the Magnitsky Act appeared to take precedence, whereas these technocrats might have preferred Hillary Clinton, but thought that their interests were better served with Donald Trump. And this rationale is what I'm thinking is why they ended up supporting Trump and helping him get over the finish line if that didn't indeed happen, and why they preferred Trump over Hillary Clinton, who was the candidate that the establishment widely expected to win that election. In 2016, according to Maria Zack, globalism was in peril, and Obama had determined that Donald Trump could only serve one term. So she said that Italian Prime Minister Matteo Renzi, who was Jim Messina's client, had raised concerns with Obama that the populist movement propelling Donald Trump's presidential campaign would derail globalism and would also lead voters to reject his constitutional referendum in Italy over the country's parliamentary structure. According to Reuters, the referendum was about power and who gets to wield it. So Trump's popularity was threatening Renzi's ability to retain power. And so according to Zack, Obama and Renzi collaborated with each other to ensure that Donald Trump only served one presidential term, and that the election was rigged electronically to ensure that that happened. How was the election rigged, according to Maria Zack? Well, she claimed that Obama diverted $400 million in pallets of cash from the $1.7 billion that Obama gave to Iran over the nuclear deal to rig the election. And I did see that there was a $400 million that was set aside to release hostages in an Iranian exchange with Iran. So perhaps that's the $400 million that she's referring to. But in any event, according to Zack, this $400 million was laundered through the Vatican and eventually made its way to Merrill Lynch. Ambassador to the Vatican was the wife of Newt Gingrich, who was advising Maria Zack, and who was also an advisor to Donald Trump. So it's curious that Newt Gingrich didn't come forth with the allegations, that Newt Gingrich didn't personally deliver the information to Donald Trump and his team, that Trump's diplomatic team within Italy didn't come forth with the allegations and contest whatever alleged fraud occurred. Instead, they tapped Maria Zack, the fundraiser for Ted Cruz, when Ted Cruz was working with Cambridge Analytica and Facebook to help harvest data and build personality and psychological profiles on potential voters to secure the election for himself. So Maria Zack was drawn from that pool to lead efforts to challenge election fraud and kind of point the blame at Obama and away from Trump. So the money that was used to rig the election, according to Zack, was deposited in an account with Merrill Lynch in Switzerland. Now, Merrill Lynch has very deep ties to Trump. For one, it is the financial advisor to the Seminole tribe of Florida, a tribe whose casino ambitions Trump has bankrolled in part. Merrill Lynch was also the leading financial advisor in the Seminole tribe's billion-dollar acquisition of the Hard Rock franchise. The Hard Rock franchise, in turn, has acquired the Trump Taj Mahal. In fact, when Carl Icahn, who was holding on to the Taj Mahal, joined the Trump administration, this is the point at which the Hard Rock acquired the Taj Mahal. And of course, Hard Rock has a long-standing relationship with the British monarchy. One of its charities is the World Wildlife Fund, which was founded by Prince Philip. So it's interesting that the Hard Rock is donating to a charity of one of the wealthiest men in the world. You'd think he could fund his own charities. According to Zack, the election was rigged by Leonardo SPA, which is an Italian defense contractor. The election rigging was not overseen by Obama officials or political appointees, but by Trump's appointees, including, for example, Louis Eisenberg, who is Trump's ambassador to Italy. The Leonardo's lobbying firm on record is Ballard Partners, another firm with deep ties to Donald Trump. So Ballard Partners is a leading fundraiser, was a leading fundraiser for the Trump presidential campaign. It also employed key Trump allies like Pam Bondi. Its lobbyists served on the Trump transition team to advise on key appointments to the Trump administration. Its lobbyists lobbied the Trump administration, and the firm also employs former employees from Priorities USA, the Messina connected company. It was a company over which Messina presided and which was used to fundraise for Joe Biden. And another new recruit to Ballard is a former Obama Middle East advisor. So it's interesting that a firm that is so deeply entrenched and embedded within the Trump camp would employ a former staffer from a Messina company and from the Obama administration. Surely, I'm sure that advisor is very capable, but you would think that they would find advisors who were maybe drawn from the Republican side of the aisle and might be more politically aligned with Trump. So according to Zack, and this is why I think she may be used, whether she knows this or not, but being used as a part of a diversionary tactic to deflect attention away from Trump and onto Obama, is that she, of all people, was chosen to present the evidence to Donald Trump, Rudy Giuliani, Mark Meadows, and General Flynn. You know, why Maria Zack, a former Ted Cruz fundraiser whose campaign worked with Cambridge Analytica, that was apparently involved in this election upset, according to Maria Zack. It looks like they want to protect Trump and then scapegoat Barack Obama, who was probably equally involved, it would appear. So upon receiving the evidence, if the evidence was in fact valid, Trump had the authority to revoke an executive order that he signed in 2018 that allowed him to preserve the integrity of American elections in the event of foreign interference. Now, Donald Trump did not evoke that executive order. Instead, he and his team planned for January 6th. Now, if you can imagine, if you had been, in fact, been caught rigging an election against yourself, you couldn't very well evoke an executive order to prosecute yourself and hold yourself accountable. So that could be an explanation for why the executive order was not evoked. Donald Trump's supporters need not have taken any action if they did, in fact, believe that somehow the election was stolen from Donald Trump. He could have evoked that executive order. Instead, his team organized the events of January 6th that provoked violence and served the purpose of diverting attention from Trump while at the same time scapegoating and creating trouble for Trump's own supporters. The security was handled within DC during that day, was handled by the District of Columbia. Somehow things were allowed to get out of hand, and who did the security, who were they taking direction from? Well, that would be their employer, which was the District of Columbia. And the District of Columbia was being advised by two firms, the Group DC, which employs former Obama campaign officials, and Ballard Partners, the firm that represents Leonardo SPA, that according to Zach, had allegedly been caught rigging the election. So once the supporters arrived and created havoc, Trump told them to go home because apparently their purpose had been served. They were used as a diversionary tactic, in my opinion. And Trump did not have a strategy on what he would do. He didn't present the allegations that Maria Zach had given him. But instead, he created this fiasco and then proceeded to campaign on challenging election fraud that he may very well have created himself. Like he may very well have rigged the election against himself. So the Group DC has some very interesting connections too. For one, it represents Curaleaf, which was a marijuana company that was lobbying Capitol Hill for legislation that would ensure that proceeds from marijuana sales would not be flagged, I think, for illicit, they would be flagged like for money laundering purposes, that they would be conceived and deemed to be legitimate proceeds and legitimate assets that could be deposited into a bank and not be characterized as drug money and therefore have those assets seized. So Curaleaf the campaign was bankrolled by Roman Abramovich, a leading Russian oligarch whose power and wealth in part was shored up by Jack Abramoff and Wilbur Ross and among individuals within those circles. The Group DC in 2020, while it had partnered with Ballard Partners, also represented Facebook. And according to Maria Zach, Leonardo SPA was involved in the election rigging. Leonardo SPA was represented by Ballard, which partnered with the Group DC, which in turn was representing Facebook. So you have the same interests that over the years had apparently established a pattern of using technology to influence elections. So it would appear that they did, in fact, or might have rigged the election in 2020. I don't know for sure because I haven't seen the forensics evidence. However, if what Maria Zach is saying is true, then I can't imagine that Trump was not knowledgeable, if not agreeable to those actions. So I have provided more information and background about these relationships in my book, Taking Back America, if you're interested in reading it. And you can find that book on Amazon and also through my website, susanbradford.org. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you could, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. I'd love to hear your thoughts, whether you agree or disagree with me. And of course, look forward to talking with you again soon.